Greetings, friends. I so wish that I could be with you in Athens, climbing that sacred hill. But I'm really glad for this opportunity to be able to share some thoughts with you now. You know, a century ago, the corporate concentration of power was understood as economic power. And of course, owners had all the authority on the strength of their property rights. The anti-democratic economic harms of concentration were understood as falling on people in their economic roles, as workers, consumers, competitors. Decades of contest and collective action eventually produced antitrust laws, at least in many societies, but also, and more importantly, the new charters of rights for workers and consumers, the laws to protect them so that they would not be vulnerable, and the institutions charged with their enforcement and governance. As important as those creations remain today, they cannot protect us from the new harms we face. In the age of surveillance capitalism, corporate power is not only economic but social. I've called the economics that shape this power surveillance capitalism because they maintain core elements of traditional capitalism: private property, market exchange, growth, and profit. But these cannot be realized without the distinctly 21st century technologies and social relations of surveillance. Hidden methods of observation secretly consume private experience, translated into behavioral data. And in an extraordinary development, these ill-gotten human-generated data are then immediately claimed as corporate property, available for manufacture and sales. These data travel to computational factories, are computed into behavioral predictions, and finally sold to business customers in a new kind of market that trades in predictive knowledge of human behavior. These are commodity markets in human futures. The anti-democratic social harms produced by these operations are not confined to individuals in their economic roles as workers and consumers. No, they fall upon users. This is a new category of humanity, and it means all of us, all the time, everywhere. Ours is a young information civilization that has not yet found its footing in democracy because the social harms we face cannot be shoehorned into Cinderella's 20th century legal slipper. So now, it is we who march naked and vulnerable. We who are without the rights, the laws, and institutions purpose-built to govern us in our digital century in the name of democracy. In an information civilization, principles of social order derive from the essential questions of knowledge, authority, and power, but as they pertain to information. And if you don't remember that, remember this: 3 essential questions. Who knows? Who decides who knows? Who decides who decides who knows? Today, the surveillance capitalist firms, beginning with the giants, hold the answers to each question, though we did not elect them to govern. On the strength of their property claims, the private surveillance empires have mounted a fundamentally anti-democratic epistemic coup. By this I mean a revolutionary takeover of knowledge and knowing. They decide what is known, who can know it, and to what purpose. The social harms that follow from this revolution leave lawmakers and the public continually whipsawed by each day's headlines bleating the latest atrocity. Our comprehension, however, is obstructed by category errors. Social harms, such as the wholesale destruction of privacy, which has occurred in the last 2 decades, or disinformation, or polarizing speech, or information flows corrupted by defactualization and bias, or massive scale behavioral modification, or unaccountable power. Each of these is siloed, treated as distinct phenomenon, leaving us in a tangle of disorientation, fragmentation, and confusion. As long as we view these harms as distinct, unrelated problems, they will remain impossible to solve. The perspective of surveillance capitalism as a revolutionary institutional order offers a way out of this frenzy. This institution reaches across the boundaries of individuals, organizations, sectors, communities, societies, and nations, re-intermediating virtually all human engagement with digital architectures, devices, products, services, and information flows. Surveillance capitalism, like all institutions, is self-reproducing. All action flows towards self-extension and self-reproduction, no matter how much and how earnestly we beg and plead with individual leaders to please change. Surveillance economics are not the inevitable consequence of digital technologies, of course not. Surveillance capitalism is not a corporation or a person. Surveillance capitalism is the digital era iron cage, and while democracy slept, it has been allowed to own, operate, and mediate the digital surround. Right now, all roads to economic and social participation lead through the institutional terrain of surveillance capitalism, a fact that has only grown in ferocity during these years of global plague. The economic institution of surveillance capitalism is the unified field against which the anti-democratic harms we face are revealed, not as isolated phenomenon, but rather as linked effects of a single cause. The epistemic coup is a unitary process that has unfolded in 4 stages, and each of these stages is a demonstration of economic cause producing social harm effect. Each develops the conditions and builds the scaffolding for the next. Very, very briefly, stage 1 is foundational, the massive secret extraction of human-generated data. Everything is founded on that. And of course it leads to stage 2, which is the unexpected and anti-democratic concentration of knowledge as the basis for a new and surprising form of social inequality, defined as the difference between what I can know and what can be known about me. Stage 3. This is where proprietary knowledge is transformed into power, weaponized for behavioral prediction and targeting, producing social harms from behavior modification at scale to widespread economic, epistemic chaos, as corrupt information is amplified by machine systems engineered to maximize extraction and improve prediction. Finally, stage 4 exploits these conditions with increasingly aggressive shows of epistemic dominance, as corporate surveillance empires now vie with democracy over the fundamental rights and legal principles that will govern. And they do this by leveraging their absolute control and unaccountable power over mission-critical information systems and infrastructures. The aim is to divide people from their governments, to substitute computational systems for society, and to assert computational governance in the place of democracy. You know, capitalism in the digital age could have taken so many forms. The problem is that the world's liberal democracies failed to construct a coherent political vision of a digital century that advances democratic principles and government. In contrast, the Chinese learned how to design and deploy digital technologies that advance their system of authoritarian rule, strategies that have become central to their domestic and foreign policies. The West's failure left a void, and that void was quickly filled by surveillance capitalism. As a result, democracy is under the kind of siege that only democracy can end. Democracy is the only countervailing institutional order that has the legitimate authority and the power to change our course. If this crucial decade of the digital century is to be the tipping point, which I believe it must be, then every solution points to one solution: a democratic counter-revolution. Make no mistake, this is the fight for the soul of our information civilization. Everything depends on politics now, and there is no doubt in my mind that the democratic counter-revolution is already underway. For this to succeed, three conditions must be met. First, public awakening and its mobilization in action and collective action. A second condition is a step change in lawmakers' comprehension and determination to act and to impose laws for a new century, purpose-built to preserve democracy from unprecedented social harms. And finally, a third condition. We need a powerful transnational conversation and collaboration where which has been assumed to be undiscussable, inevitable, settled, and too powerful to contest is finally revealed as a highly contingent human invention and a violation of the most basic principles of supply and demand. This new conversation recognizes that big tech companies are not shining pillars of entrepreneurship and innovation, but rather ruthless and wily monopolists whose trillion-dollar companies are built on a social harm machine that perfected illicit data extraction and the universal destruction of privacy, and is now on course to unravel the sociological and psychological substrates upon which the very premise of democracy rests. All of it leaving we the people as helpless bystanders to the demolition of social norms and foundational institutions. As to the first condition, the public awakening, data from the last few years actually reveal a decisive rupture of faith with surveillance capitalism. We see it in large survey data. We see it in the discontent and defection of tech employees. We see it in expert analyses around the world as well as journalistic accounts. Of the many data I could cite, I'm going to mention just one data point. It comes from a substantial U.S. survey, and what's interesting about this survey is that it was just published a week ago, that is to say in mid-September 2021. Now it's interesting to consider that the outbreak of the pandemic around April 2020, it was Eric Schmidt, former Google CEO, who opined to the press that the pandemic would teach Americans to be, quote, a little bit grateful for powerful tech companies. But according to this survey, just published, as I said, an extraordinary, for survey data, absolutely extraordinary, 93% of respondents, American citizens, agreed that it should be illegal for private companies to collect information about people without their permission. This is a blow to the heart of surveillance capitalism. The public itself, at least in America, where, of course, we have been somewhat late to the party, which makes this all the more interesting. Here we have an indication of the American public asking us to redefine illicit data extraction as theft. The very foundations of surveillance capitalism's illegitimate power. Our job as activists, scholars, journalists, leaders, our job must be to support and mobilize this wave of public awareness. And as to the second condition, lawmakers too have begun to show their mettle, even stronger now as they feel the public at their backs, with a new insistence that the digital must live in democracy's house. Europe continues to lead the world. The new legislative proposals, including and actually combining the Digital Services Act, the Digital Markets Act, and the proposals for democratic governance of artificial intelligence, these together begin to set us on a democratic trajectory. They don't provide all of the ultimate solutions. What they provide, however, is exactly what we need: a new beginning, tying data collection to fundamental rights and data use to public service. The current parliamentary debates, amendments, and discussions in member states are all part of an emerging democratic vision. And the same spirit is finally on the move in the U.S., with dozens of congressional proposals that would interrupt and even outlaw key aspects of surveillance capitalism, and a growing cadre of lawmakers in the United States with a strong grasp of surveillance economics as the unitary cause of a new set of social harm effects unique to our century. As to the third condition of transnational dialogue and action, I offer you one very brief example. In alignment with this 93% who would outlaw secret data extraction, we now have lawmakers and citizens on both sides of the Atlantic who are converging on the idea of banning surveillance advertising. The first and most public-facing product of illegitimate data extraction. And of course, a proposal that would have been considered unthinkable only a few years ago. In March of 2021, U.S. Congressional Representative Anna Eshoo and Representative Chakowski announced their work on a bill to ban surveillance advertising. And they are matched across the Atlantic when in June, member of the European Parliament Alexandra Geese and U.S. Congresswoman Lori Trahan held a public discussion on banning surveillance-based advertising. And that very month, nearly 50 global civil rights and civil society institutions delivered their People's Declaration to the EU Parliament in advance of the debates on the amendments to the Digital Services Act. And this declaration, which has now been signed by nearly 100 organizations, demanded an end to surveillance capitalism, beginning with a ban on surveillance advertising. And just last week, again, mid-September 2021, the Financial Times reported on new European Commission proposals for, quote, hard rules to curb the power of micro-targeting. This kind of transnational convergence of citizens and lawmakers can fulfill the promise of the third decade, finally altering our civilizational course, asserting that there is no such place as cyberspace or any other space exempt from society's rights and laws, that we must do what our democracies have always done is asserted in these declarations, that we must face concentrated anti-democratic power in the way that we always have done. We pass laws. We pass laws that protect and advance the rights of the many against the economic interests of the few. We assert that our destiny is not to become a dystopia of surveillance, control, and engineered certainty for the sake of others' wealth and power. We assert that we have not forgotten and will not forget that each generation is summoned to fight for the durability and revitalization of humanity's best idea. I leave you now with a word for Athens. It strikes me as providential that this urgent discussion unfurls in Athena's city, the warrior goddess who did not vanquish by brute force, but drew advantage from the careful union of forethought, strategic insight, and disciplined technique. Her victories, that others considered impossible, were achieved with weapons purpose-built for unprecedented threats, and with tactics intended to inspire principles as much as subjugation. These uniquely Athenian forms of action are and will be essential to us and to all of today's warriors for democracy, citizens, lawmakers, artists, journalists, scholars, policy experts, activists, leaders, all of us, as we redirect our information civilization toward a democratic and digital future. Thank you.